Now call this meeting to order. To begin, if you would, please record your attendance, board members. We have 12 present. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, a moment of silence, and ask Deputy Matt Erickson, if you would, please lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. September is the month of the year where we have our election of board chair. So I, as the superintendent, am actually sitting in to start the meeting for that purpose. I want to let the board members know that that is the next item on the agenda. I want to make sure you know the process we're going to go through. We will ask for nominations from the board for board chair. It does not require a second. We will take each nominated name, and after we close nominations, have a vote on the first name that was selected, and then for second and on down the line based upon how many nominees you have. The first member of the board to receive a majority of the votes will then be elected. So I want to make sure you all are aware of the process before we get started. Do you have any questions related to the process we'll have for election of the board chair? With that being said, I now open the floor for nominations for school board chairman. We have a nomination for Gary Anderson as board chair. Carol tells me my microphone is still not working. Test, test.
There it is. There you go. Eric's wasn't.
We have a nomination from Mr. Eric Welch for Gary Anderson as board chair. Mr. Fiskus?
I was going to nominate Gary also.
All right.
That's all right.
Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, are we ready for a vote? Go ahead and vote.
Are we?
Who are we voting for?
Voting. Thank you. Tests. Obviously, I'm not good at this. The vote is for the nomination of Gary Anderson as board chair. There were no other nominees, so a vote of yes would be yes in favor of Gary Anderson, and vote of no, of course, is no.
Your vote is 12 yes and 0 no.
With a vote. At this time, we'll take a moment to switch seats so that Mr. Anderson can take the chair. Anybody bother asking to accept it?
Well, he's standing there drooling over that chair.
You got it?
Spilling coffee on it.
All right, thank you very much, Board. I appreciate your support and confidence in me leading the board again for another year. At this time, we're going to vote for the vice chairman. Run it the same way as Mr. Golden did. We're asking for a nomination. Mr. Ha?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to nominate Nancy Garrett.
Okay, we have Nancy Garrett's nomination. Are there any other nominations? Mr. Cash?
Yes, I'd like to second that. Nancy's done a fantastic job, and Gary, so have you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we have any other people do we want to nominate for that? Okay, I see none. Therefore, if we are ready to vote for Ms. Nancy Garrett as vice chair, if you go ahead and record your vote now.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Congratulations. Ms. Nancy Garrett, would you like to say anything?
Thank you all. I appreciate the confidence you have in me. And as you know, Williamson County Schools are my passion, as is evidenced from my hoarse voice from my Williamson County Schools class reunion this weekend. I love our district. I love what we try to do for all students. I appreciate the opportunity to work with Gary. And since we're ending this policy review cycle this year, I really like to help us work, on our teamwork and our teaming. And Gary would love to have the opportunity to talk to you about that at some point. So
Great. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, thank you, Board. We're ready then to move on to the items of particular public interest or public comment. We have one speaker for this evening, Mr. Fred Ranfelder. If you'd come to the mic, state your name and address and your topic, and we have about 3 minutes for your presentation. You're on.
Test. Okay, thank you. My name is Fred Reinfelder. I'm from Fairview, address 7130 Donald Wilson Drive, and I'm here today to present to the board three areas of concern. One is safety related in the middle school, and the other is more facility related in the high school. And I have photos that I can share with the board. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but to help illustrate the situation. First, with the middle school, the two safety-related concerns, one has to do with the facility itself. We have a performing arts center that is not connected to the main school, so we have like a breezeway. Think of it as a single-lane road. And when the school goes under lockdown, the students have been instructed that if they are in that breezeway under a lockdown, they are not allowed back in the building. And the anxiety that's created with my daughter and others is that they don't want to take classes in the Performing Arts Center because psychologically they're afraid that if they get caught on the outside and the perpetrators outside, the bulletproof doors will help, but they've got to run for their lives. And that's how it's been played back to me. So I know it's a touchy subject, it's emotional, but I just got to believe there's a better solution in trying to connect those two buildings than to just not take any action. I think it's a liability waiting to happen. The second one is perhaps even a little more alarming. We have students that, if they want to take French or geometry class, have to walk on campus from the middle school to the high school. It's a half-a-mile trek, because I mapped it out in the card, in an open traffic area with no sidewalks. And the way it's being supervised today is there's cameras within the middle school, and the officer will watch the students go a part of the way, and then the high school has to pick them up when they get back in view from the high school as they enter. So there is a portion of area that is not even in camera view. So again, small thing, but it's a prohibitor from these students taking really very important classes, of course. And I just got to believe there's a more formal way of transporting these children back and forth rather than have them walk a mile each day to take these classes. So I'm just asking for a closer examination of that. I'm willing to meet anybody up at the school, if you're not familiar with Fairview schools, to try to come up with a better solution. And I've got maps here of the middle school. And I only brought 5 copies. The second is with the high school. I participated in the community cleanup, and I was up there for the open house. And there's been a lot of improvement, so I'm not complaining. It's a lot better than I've seen it in the past. it's looked very bad in the past, and we've come a long way. But the biology room that my ninth grade daughter has to sit in is arguably should be embarrassing for the school, embarrassing from the district. It's probably from the 80s, so the structure of the room is one thing. But the facilities on the inside, and it's on the second page here, I actually was astonished that it was even allowed to be presented this way on the first day. That the handles, the hardware are literally falling off, dangling. There's cracked wood underneath the desk that the children could get splinters or get cut on, and the sinks in the reservoir areas don't even look like they were cleaned over the summer. So I know there's been work at both schools. Progress has been made. We got a little ways to go, and I guess and I know there's a lot of priorities with the district, so believe me, I work in the corporate world, I understand that, but when we're investing multi-millions in sports complexes, in innovation centers, and things that are very, very cool and much needed too, it seems the blocking and tackling's got to get done before that. And I feel Fairview is one of these, at least these examples, exemplify the fact that we're not doing that. We're not taking care of STEM class basics when we're building multi-million-dollar 21st century STEM facilities. And so I'm just asking, I know this isn't 100% equitable, but I'm asking for a little more attention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, our next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Anyone like to make a motion for approval of our agenda? Motion to approve from Mr. Welch, second from Mr. Hall. Any discussion? Okay, I see none. If you go ahead and record your vote then, please. Mr. Wimberly, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Okay.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, Board. Our next item is the consent agenda items. I'd like to make a motion for the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Mr. Wimberly. I'd like to second. We have a second from Ms. Durham. Thank you. Any discussion, comments, or questions on the consent agenda? Okay, I see none. If you go ahead and record your votes, please.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, Board. When the Board approved the consent agenda, they approved the school board meeting minutes. We approved board policies on second reading. We approved policies for deletion, 3 of them. We approved the recommendations for field trip fee requests. We approved the collaborative conferencing team. We approved the calendar committee membership for the board. We approved the school fees. We approved the addition of special education teacher assistants. We approved the Atmos Energy request for permanent easement and temporary construction easement on Creekside Elementary School. And we approval of Edmondson Pike sewer easement request. The next item is communications to the board. Superintendent report. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say that I appreciate Gary Anderson because he's better at running the microphones than I am. So those of you who might be watching in the public, I apologize for that few seconds where you could not hear me as we were working on that. I did want to let you know that we had a great marching band exhibition last Saturday night. It was so nice to see so many different bands perform. Each one has its own unique style, and it was a great event to watch them perform that, and to do a fundraiser for those marching band programs. One of the best things, in my opinion, at the end of it, the 8th grade bands from the feeder pattern schools actually got on the field and performed a song with all the bands, and it was a pretty wonderful event. We've had a really good start to the school year. I think many of you are aware of that. We still have a handful of challenges on the logistics side of it. Number one, as you all know, we have enough bus drivers to fill every route plus 2 if everyone is able to come to work, but the reality is we do have some illnesses. So we do have a handful of routes where we do still have some struggles, so we still are pressing and asking the public, and if anyone is interested in taking a bus driver job, we do encourage you to apply. We will train you. We also ask our parents to have patience with us as we go through that process. One of the things that we do know, especially in Middle Tennessee, is that we're a little bit ahead of our peers. But for parents whose children are, leaving a little bit late to get to the bus, that really doesn't matter because we do want to serve you all a little better. Next thing I wanted to mention to you is that tomorrow is the Chamber of Commerce, the Williamson Inc.'s Education Day, and they are spending the first half of the day, the morning, discussing education with members of the Chamber. Traditionally, the Chamber would have a lunch meeting for education, and Dr. David Snowden from Franklin Special and I would each speak. This year, they've expanded the scope of that, and we're going to spend the whole morning talking about education in Williamson County. So we're very excited about that for the coming day. The final thing I wanted to mention to you is that the TSBA fall district meetings are coming up, and if you have any interest in attending those, let's make sure that you let Rebecca Hagan, my assistant, know. September 26th is actually our region's meeting, just to remind you of that. And Mr. Chair, we do not this month have any student or teacher spotlights. We took care of the summertime in last month's meeting, and that is my report.
I mean, we don't get to see Ms. Birdsong come and tell us some wonderful things about our students tonight?
She's hiding in the back tonight. I guarantee you she'll be back next month.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Golden? All right, then the next item is the board chairman's report. Mr. Golden told you about the fall district meetings for TSBA. There's also the TSBA conference in November. It's November 14th through the 17th. If you're interested in attending that, also get with Ms. Hagan about that one. Also want to thank, this evening we had a wonderful performance by the Heritage Middle Choir was here under the direction of Lisa Benton, and Ms. Benton really likes her job a lot. And the kids were just awesome. We're very, very proud of them. And we have with us this evening, and I'm going to embarrass them as if they'd stand up, is Boy Scout Troop 16. If you guys could stand up and take a bow, and appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. All right.
We've got another scout.
We do? We have another scout? Okay, sorry, couldn't see it from the podium. What troop?
He's with the 137.
The 137 troop. Well, thank you for being here this evening as well. Always glad to have our scouts with us. All right, anyone have any questions for me? Are we ready to get into the regular agenda items? All right, well, next item is unfinished business, and we have none. So we move into new business, the 2019-2020 school board budget. The first one is general purpose school fund amendment for a LEAP grant for Centennial High School. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is approval for us to receive the LEAP grant, and you can see the detail on the form. Staff recommends approval.
Anyone like to make a motion for this one? Motion for Mr. Welch. Anyone like to second this one? All right, Mr. Mitchell is with second. Any discussion, questions? Okay, I see none. You have the superintendent's recommendation. If you go ahead and record your votes then, please.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Our next one is the 2019-2020 school board budget, and it's general purpose school fund amendment for disproportionality from IDEA. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Likewise, staff recommends approval for this expenditure within our existing budget.
I'd like to make a motion for this one. We have a motion for Mr. Fiskus and second for Mr. Cash. Any comments, questions? Okay, I see none. If you go ahead and record your votes on this one, please.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Our next new business item is rezoning parameters for the new school. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You board members do recall, of course, that last week we had our work session and spent some time talking about zoning parameters. And many of you shared your thoughts with the zoning question. And we have a memo where I have recommended 3 particular zoning parameters that are actually showing up on the screen, but I want to specifically mention the parameters that we recommended: to minimize the impact on families as much as reasonably possible, to maintain consistent feeder patterns as much as reasonably possible, and when possible, zone plan developments prior to construction to optimize school capacities. The reality is that many of you made some suggestions that are very valuable. And as I processed through that, one of the things I concluded was that each one of your suggestions are items that we are going to consider administratively, whether or not they are parameters. And I came to the conclusion that from a zoning parameter standpoint, to stand on the request we made of you for our basic parameters, but with the emphasis that those factors that you mentioned are items that we will consider administratively. One of the things I intend to tell you when we come to you with a recommendation next month is give you a list of all the factors that we considered as we process through that. So with that, Mr. Chair, with that explanation, I do recommend approval of the memo as is, with a caveat that we are going to consider all those factors that we discussed at the work session.
Thank you, sir. Anyone like to make a motion on the parameters as presented? We have a motion from Ms. Garrett. I'd like to second that. We have a second from Ms. Durham. And further discussion, Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason, do you mind giving us the scope of this rezoning just for the public? I know we talked about it on Thursday, but.
Sure. This is officially the rezoning for the new middle school on Henpeck Lane. We do believe that we have the potential to discuss middle schools at Page, Heritage, Thompson Station, and potentially Spring Station because of the nature of building a new school, along with the feeder patterns for those 4 middle schools.
Okay, and I guess based on the third bullet, potentially other opportunities around the district that don't affect any existing families.
That's correct.
Right.
Because the opportunity's there, we will review that as well. I will say we do know for sure that there's one potential development in the zone that we're going to be discussing in the middle school context, but we will double check around the county as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Jason, I appreciate, or Mr. Golden, I guess, I'm being a little bit too casual. I appreciate your comments and the fact that you intend to take into consideration all the different options and concerns that we had last week. I would like to understand exactly why you did not feel it was necessary to add the walkability or bikeability as a parameter, given the fact that the county has a traffic issue and schools have a significant impact on car traffic, and the pedestrian access to in the last zoning was really one of our biggest concerns of the people being impacted, families being impacted.
Sure. It is something that we have considered administratively and will consider. One of the challenges that we faced in the previous rezoning was what is walkability? You know, in some of our more densely populated areas, students have the potential to walk to one or more schools. And so we do use that administratively, and we will use that administratively. Because we had set a baseline structure in our request for recommended zoning parameters, I didn't feel like it was appropriate to choose that particular potential parameter over any others. And so that's why it's not actually in the request for you all to set that as a parameter. But again, I do want you to know that that is something that we consider, and we consider regularly. I think back to the last 10 years that I've been, actually 13 years that I've been involved in zoning discussions, and each time there's some discussion of that. And as we grow and as our municipalities continue to build walking paths, it becomes more important. So we're not going to ignore it. It is going to be a factor for us administratively. I'm just not asking you all to set that as a standard parameter.
Okay, Mr. Mitchell?
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on this one? Okay, I see none, and you have the director's recommendation. If you go ahead and record your votes, please.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Our next item is board parameters 2020-2021 school calendar. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the last few years, the board has had the opportunity every year for school calendar parameters. For the last few years, the board has elected not to set parameters, and I am actually not asking you to set any this year. One of my big reasons for that is we do have a committee that involves teachers and parents as well, and school staff. And based on that, staff recommends approval to set those particular parameters.
Okay, how about we take a motion and vote on this one to say no parameters, if that is the wishes of the board, if we have any. Anyone like to make a motion on what Mr. Golden has recommended? We have a motion from Mr. Wimberly, a second from Mr. Welch. And Mr. Welch.
I'm going to remove that. I was making the motion, clicked the wrong button.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Garrett.
Yes, just a question here. So, no parameters does not mean that the staff has no parameters in coming up with the calendar. There are some very, very specific things that have to fall into place. Mr. Golden, could you explain some of those for the public, please?
Sure, and you are correct, Ms. Garrett. There are a number of parameters that the staff sets. Number one is the number of days in a school year. We have to have a certain number of days in the school year. There's also a teacher contract that actually is officially 200 days, so we'll factor those in. On a more practical level, I'll give you a couple of examples. One, they try to make sure that the semesters break at the winter break. And so if you all recall, there may be times where the number of days in the fall relate unfavorably to the number of days in the spring, and so they factor that in. They also factor in issues like holidays, a number of items like that. One of the things I do intend to give you when you actually vote on the calendar is a detail from the committee of the items that they actually did discuss in this particular year as well.
Do you also look at, oh, I'm sorry, should I?
Go ahead.
Do you also look at absence trends?
That's an excellent point. That is part of what we look at historically on particular days, whether it's the first day of school or days within the school year based upon traditional holidays. Another issue related to that is half days versus full days. Lately, the committee has tried very hard to create as many full days as they can, and that is in part related to absences.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cleveland?
Yes, I do agree with no parameters, only on the fact that each district is unique and we always have our exceptions, and I'd rather not get locked into it. But my question is, if any of our constituents would like to see those parameters, will those be available to them?
Sure, and I actually emailed the board the parameters that group used last year. We'll make sure that we share that with the public. Now, as the committee meets, they talk about those parameters each year. They talk about the standards that they have to meet from the state requirements and the standards that they're setting for themselves as a committee. So we'll make sure that we do share that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Okay, I see none. You have the director's recommendation. If you go ahead and record your votes.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, Board. We're into now board policies on first reading. The first one is 1.2021, Code of Ethics for School Board Members. Ms. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you all know from the work session, you discussed a couple of potential changes to the School Board Code of Ethics based on the TSBA recommendations. I want to let you know that this is officially first reading. Your annual agenda actually calls for you to approve the Code of Ethics at the October meeting, and so again, this is first reading.
Anyone like to make a motion for this one? Mr. Cash made a motion. Was it? Mr. Welch is the second. Any comments, questions, discussions on this one? Okay, I see none. We have the director's recommendation. If you go ahead and record your votes on this policy on first reading.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. The next policy is 4.603, promotion and retention. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff recommends approval at first reading for the changes to the promotion and retention policy consistent with Tennessee law.
Anyone like to make a motion on this one? We have a motion from Mr. Haw. Ms. Emerson, second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on this one? Okay, I see none. If you go ahead then and record your votes, you have the director's recommendation.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. The next policy is policy 4.6051, credit requirements for graduation. Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Likewise, the recommendation at first reading for the changes to the credit requirements for graduation policy is based on changes to Tennessee law. And I think you all know that this is one of those policies that changes fairly regularly based on those changes at the state level. We recommend approval.
Anyone like to make a motion on this one? We have a motion from Ms. Emerson. We have a second from Mr. Mitchell. Any further questions, comments, discussion? You all been very quiet tonight. I see none. You have the director's recommendation. If you go ahead and record your votes.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Mr. Golden, my paper has run out of items for us to go over tonight. Does your paper agree?
Yes, sir.
Board members, don't have anything else on our agenda. If we're good, we can go home early. Monday Night Football game is on. So this meeting is adjourned.